You're watching Southern Crimes.
June 18th, 1977, San Juan Springs, Arizona. You're driving through the Sonoran Desert 40 miles west of Tucson. The landscape stretches endlessly toward the Mexican border. It's the kind of desolate place where people come to disappear, where secrets get buried under miles of sand and silence. You pull onto the shoulder so you can stretch your legs. It's over 100 degrees outside. The only movement is the wind shifting through the saguaro and the occasional passing vehicle on the interstate. Feels lonely out here. That is, until you look closer at the tire tracks leading off into the scrub. That's when you see him, a man lying motionless in the scrub brush, wearing what looks like a bulletproof vest. A .357 Magnum rests nearby, but something feels wrong about the scene. It's too clean, too staged. As you approach the body, you notice a piece of paper pinned inside his underwear, a $2 bill covered in coded Spanish names and what appears to be a hand-drawn map of smuggling routes. But this isn't what it appears to be. This is a message. Because in the Arizona desert, where the border between legitimate business and organized crime is perilously thin, some people know too much, and some secrets are worth killing for. This is Southern Crimes. Yavapai County, Arizona, October 17th, 2003. The high desert of Arizona is a landscape of stark beauty and eerie silence. On a Friday evening in October, 19-year-old Lisa Guerreri and her boyfriend, 20-year-old Brandon Rumbaugh, left Scottsdale for a quick overnight trip to celebrate their one-year anniversary. They borrowed a white Ford F-150 from Lisa's mom, packed a disposable camera, and headed north toward the stargazing areas near Bumble Road. Lisa was a secretary with dreams of being a wedding planner. Brandon was an ASU student and former Marine Reserve member. He wanted to open his own gym. They were both young, successful, and by all accounts, looking forward to a life together. But when Brandon failed to show up for work on Saturday, their phones went straight to no service. By Sunday, a private search party of friends and family found the white truck parked roughly 2 miles west of I-17. Inside the bed, still zipped into their sleeping bags, Lisa and Brandon were dead. The crime scene along Bumblebee Road offered little in the way of a struggle. Both victims had been shot multiple times in the head and torso. The weapon was a .25 caliber handgun, a small pocket gun that investigators noted was an unusual choice for a double homicide. There was no evidence of a assault, and while most of their belongings remained, 2 specific items were missing: the truck keys and a VHS camcorder borrowed from Lisa's mom. Roughly 100 feet from the truck, searchers found the couple's disposable camera smashed against the desert floor. When the film was eventually developed, the photos showed the couple smiling and enjoying the high desert air just hours before their deaths. One final photo was a mystery, an overexposed shot of a building interior with a CFL light fixture. Detectives believe it might have been from a bar or restaurant in the Bumblebee area that they visited shortly before settling in for the night. The brutality of the crime suggested something personal, and suspicion soon fell on a member of the very group that found the bodies. This individual was reportedly infatuated with Lisa and had a history of arguing with Brandon. He moved to Washington shortly after the murders, and while he passed a polygraph at the time, current investigators now admit that clearing him based solely on that test might have been a mistake. As the years passed, other theories emerged from the Arizona dust. Some pointed to a man named Rusty Rankin, who murdered 2 campers in Crown King 6 months later, but his DNA didn't match the bumblebee seen. Others considered the Cookie Bandit, Joseph Henry Burgess, a nomadic killer known for targeting unmarried couples who camped together. But without a definitive match, the case drifted into the cold files of Yavapai County. Today, the investigation is powered by a dedicated team of cold case volunteers, comprised of former teachers and scientists who are reviewing every page of the original file. They're utilizing modern genetic genealogy to analyze DNA found at the scene, hoping to find a match in public databases that didn't exist in 2003. They're still looking for the missing camcorder and the building with the CFL light. Lisa and Brandon were just starting their lives when they were executed in their sleeping bags. Their families have waited over 20 years for an answer that remains as elusive as a desert mirage. Peoria, Arizona, July 22nd, 1989. Pamela Page was a 32-year-old business owner who spent her days running fast-forward video in the growing suburbs of Peoria. Standing 5 feet 8 inches tall with distinct red hair, she was a fixture in her community. That is until the evening of July 21st, 1989, when an employee watched her walk to her car for the last time. The following morning, her husband, Rob Page, claimed he found a 2-page farewell letter. According to Rob, Pamela wrote that she was leaving him for a woman named Sarah and had helped herself to $60,000 in cash from the video store safe. He didn't call her family in Arkansas to break the news. In fact, they only found out she was gone 4 days later when they called the house and Rob casually mentioned that she'd walked out. To the Peoria police, something didn't feel right. The investigation into Rob Page quickly dismantled his narrative piece by piece. When Pamela's father saw a copy of the quote-unquote farewell letter, he knew immediately the signature was a fraud, a suspicion later confirmed by the Arizona State Crime Lab. Under pressure, Rob eventually admitted he'd composed the letter on a computer and forged his wife's name, claiming he was simply embarrassed that she'd left him. Then there was the matter of Pamela's Chevy Corvette. Rob told the family he'd found the car abandoned at a Winchell's donut shop. But he neglected to mention the witness who saw Rob himself park the Corvette at the very shop and disappear into a taxi that he'd called from a nearby auto parts store. His alibi for the day of the disappearance, spending hours fixing his truck, was equally hollow. Not a single employee at the shops he named remembered him or his vehicle. The most telling evidence, however, was in the house. Pamela's 2 dogs were her beloved pets, yet Rob claimed that she'd taken one and left the other behind. While her license was gone, her house keys and credit cards were left sitting on the kitchen table. For decades, the case was at a stalemate. In the late 90s, police brought ground-penetrating radar to the Page backyard, but the desert soil revealed nothing. The family even consulted a psychic who envisioned Pamela buried near a gray factory and railroad tracks, leading a reporter to a site in Peoria that matched the description perfectly, but no remains were found. The final shift came years after Rob Page died of cancer in 2009. Behind a garage wall in his former home, the new owners discovered a hidden book with a chilling title, How to Make Someone Disappear. In July 2017, 28 years after Pamela vanished, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office finally issued a formal conclusion. They stated that based on new interviews and evidence, Robert Page would have been charged with second-degree murder if he were still alive. While the state considers the perpetrator identified, the file remains unresolved for the Frisbee family. Pamela's remains have never been found, and her sister believes the final secret may have been shared on a deathbed, held by relatives who still refuse to speak. Tucson, Arizona, June 18, 1977. Charles Morgan was the 39-year-old president of a Tucson escrow agency. He lived a life of quiet until it was destroyed by a series of bizarre events. On June 18, 1977, his body was found in the San Juan Springs area 40 miles west of Tucson. He'd been killed by a single gunshot wound to the back of the head. Despite the grim circumstances, the Pima County Sheriff's Department officially ruled the death a suicide, a conclusion that remains one of the most contested in Arizona history. Morgan's death was in fact the culmination of months of extreme paranoia. In March, he'd vanished for 3 days, returning home with his hands bound by zip ties and a plastic handcuff on his ankle. He was unable to speak, writing a note claiming he'd been kidnapped and that his throat had been painted with a hallucinogenic drug. From that moment on, he wore a bulletproof vest everywhere and grew a beard, convinced he was a marked man. The scene in the desert was a collection of anomalies that really defied logic. Morgan was found wearing his bulletproof vest. His .357 Magnum was nearby, but it bore no fingerprints. Pinned inside his underwear, investigators found a $2 bill covered in coded information. It contained 7 Spanish surnames, a map showing smuggling routes to the Mexican border, and a reference to the Bible verse Ecclesiastes 12:1-8. Inside his car, police found a police monitor, a CB radio, and a piece of his own teeth wrapped in a white handkerchief. Then, 2 days after the discovery, a woman calling herself Green Eyes claimed Morgan had been hiding in a motel with $60,000 in cash, trying to buy his way out of a gang contract on his life. When police searched his car, the briefcase was there, but the money was gone. The mystery extended into Morgan's professional files. As an escrow agent, he'd reportedly handled millions of dollars for gold and platinum that didn't physically exist. Some investigative journalists believe he was laundering money for organized crime syndicates, possibly the Bonanno family, and had kept a set of duplicate records of the transactions. In May 1977, just weeks before his death, Morgan had given a secret sworn deposition to the state attorney general regarding illegal business on the border. He also refused an offer of physical protection. The fallout from his death seemed to follow anyone who touched the case. 3 weeks after he died, men claiming to be FBI agents searched his home, but the FBI later denied they ever sent them. Years later, a man driving a car identical to an investigative reporter's was shot to death, a hit many believed was intended for the journalist, digging into Morgan's past. The Pima County Medical Examiner's Office officially classifies Chuck Morgan's death as unsolved. For his family, the code on the $2 bill and the bulletproof vest aren't the marks of a man ending his own life, but the tools of a witness who knew too much. Williams, Arizona, February 14th, 1982. On Valentine's Day in 1982, an Arizona Department of Public Safety officer was scouring the shoulder of Interstate 40 for a blown-out tire when he looked toward a cedar tree roughly 25 feet from the roadway. There, he saw the decomposing body of a young woman. She was lying face down, dressed in designer jeans and a striped sweater, but she wore no shoes or socks. Torn belt loops suggested she'd been dragged from the asphalt into the brush. For the next 39 years, she was known to the state of Arizona only as Valentine Sally. The medical examiner estimated she'd been dead for approximately 2 weeks, listing the cause of death as presumed asphyxiation. A single telling piece of evidence remained in her mouth. A dissolved aspirin was tucked into a cavity in her molar. That aspirin linked her to a sighting on February 3rd at the Monte Carlo truck stop in Ash Fork. A waitress there remembered a girl with a severe toothache who was accompanied by an older man in a checkered leather vest and a felt cowboy hat. They'd left together at 4 a.m., headed east into the dark. The investigation was hampered by nearly 4 decades of dead ends and a high-profile failure back in 1984. Using scientifically unproven dental matching, authorities erroneously identified the body as a runaway from Florida named Melody Cutlip. A death certificate was issued, and the case was technically closed until 1986, when the real Melody Cutlip walked back into her family's home alive. Valentine Sally was stripped of her name once again, and her file returned to the shelf. A breakthrough finally came in 2005 when the Coconino County Sheriff's Office assigned a volunteer cold case squad to the file. They utilized the same forensic genetic genealogy that identified the Golden State Killer, uploading a DNA profile from a preserved blood sample to public databases. In early 2021, they finally found a match, a cousin in St. Louis. The trail led to a family with a daughter who'd vanished around the new year in 1982 following a domestic argument. In February 2021, DNA testing confirmed her identity as 17-year-old Carolyn Eaton. She'd left her Missouri home after her family found her in the company of 2 unknown men. She walked out the front door and spent the next few weeks hitchhiking through the Southwest, eventually working as a dishwasher in Phoenix before making her final, fatal stop in Ash Fork. So while the victim finally has her name back, the homicide remains an active investigation. Detectives are now focused on the man in the leather vest with the felt cowboy hat. Some investigators have looked at a man named Royal Russell Long, a truck driver and serial killer active at the time, but no formal link has been established. Patty Wilkins, the waitress who gave Carolyn the aspirin that night in 1982, she was the one who originally paid for her burial and headstone in Williams. For nearly 40 years, the community looked after the girl under the cedar tree. Today, Carolyn's family finally has the answers they sought, but for the cold case squad, the business remains unfinished. The search for the man in the felt hat continues. Yavapai County, Arizona, October 16th, 1998. The Yavapai Desert of Arizona is a place where many people go to disappear, but some are just better at it than others. On an October morning in 1998, a hunter moving through a remote area of Yavapai County came across skeletal remains buried in the dry earth. Forensic specialists confirmed the bones belonged to a woman named Joanne Albanese, a 39-year-old mother who'd vanished from Las Vegas 3 years earlier. The primary suspect wasn't a common criminal. He was a man who knew exactly how to hide a body because he'd spent years teaching others how to find them. John Addis was a former sergeant and forensic expert with the Alaska State Troopers. He was a gifted technician, a trained pilot, and a survivalist who understood the mechanics of a death investigation from the inside out. By the time Joanne's remains were found, though, Addis was already gone, utilizing his training to stay several steps ahead of a multi-state manhunt. The pattern of John Addis's life was one of escalating control and sudden flight. In the 1980s, he kidnapped his 4 children from Alaska during a custody dispute, hiding them in a remote Montana cabin and telling them their mother was dead. After serving time for that abduction, he skipped parole in 1989 and began a life as a long-term fugitive. By 1995, he was living in Las Vegas under the stolen identity of John Edwards. He met Joanne Albanese at a gym and moved into her life. When Joanne attempted to end the relationship on the night of August 19th, well, they both vanished. 3 days later, her Honda Accord was found abandoned in a place called Little Hells Canyon near Prescott, Arizona. Investigators searching Addis's residence found his real Alaskan ID hidden in a wallet duct taped shut, but the man himself was gone. Addis fled south, crossing into Mexico and adopting the name John Stone. He repeated his predatory cycle in Guadalajara, meeting 26-year-old Laura Padilla at another fitness center. In 1997, Laura vanished with him, leaving behind her belongings and a suspicious note about eloping. For For 9 years, Addis lived in Chiapas under a third alias, posing as a Canadian expatriate teaching English and tennis. The final act of his violence was discovered on October 18, 2006. Inside a Chiapas apartment, authorities found the bodies of Laura and her 2 young children, aged 4 and 7. They'd been dead for days. More than 20 syringes were found near Laura's body. Addis's professional documents and fake IDs were scattered throughout the home, but the fugitive had already crossed the border into Guatemala. The manhunt finally ended in a hotel room in Guatemala City. On October 16, 2006, the same week his victims were discovered in Mexico, Addis was found dead. While many suspected a final act of suicide, an autopsy determined that the 56-year-old had died of a heart attack. Fingerprint comparisons confirmed the man on the bed was in fact the former trooper from Alaska. With his death, the files on multiple murders across 2 countries were officially closed, leaving a trail of broken families from Alaska to Central America. Arizona's vast stretches of desert and lonely highways have long provided a backdrop for those seeking an end to their stories. From the coded bills of escrow agents to the calculated flight of a forensic expert, the landscape keeps its secrets until the wind or a lucky hunter brings them to the surface. For the families of the missing, the desert isn't just a place, but a period of waiting that never truly ends.